Hello folks, and welcome to another Patreon exclusive tutorial where today we're going to be talking about goblin skin. And I'm quite excited for this one because, well, here's a palette with some of my favourite colours on it. And these are the main colours that we're going to use. I've already started to apply just a base coat of the Colour Punch, but I want you to just start out by working up some mixtures of the two greens and just getting brighter and brighter with those. So as we go through this process, there are obviously some things I want you to keep in mind. It's not just a straight workup, but it is pretty simple. All I really need you to be thinking about at this point is any areas where you later want to blush with pink are gonna have to be worked up all the way to a much brighter, higher value color in order for that to be successful. So not only do we have to build contrast in our actual skin tones, but we have to remember that not all of this is going to stay green. So areas where they may not necessarily be catching as much light as we might think they are, we might still have to bring up to brighter tones so that we can account for glazing in some pinks, which is obviously, as you've seen the finished piece, something that we're going to do later on. Now the main example of this is obviously the nose, so as we keep working up you will see that I will go very bright with the nose pretty immediately and pretty quickly, so let's start going through some of that. And at this point you can kind of see that I'm pretty much 50-50 between the frog green and the green skin punch at this point, so still not nearly as bright as I can actually get, but I'm already starting to get a really punchy, vibrant goblinoid skin here. So again, just a consciousness of how much you're highlighting and where areas, like we said previously, that are going to be pink are going to need to be taken up further than they normally would. But at the same time, we are going for a really bright, punchy, like a war crow kind of style, like the way the Spanish guys basically paint orc skin. That's kind of what I'm looking for here. So you will notice that there's probably a lot more brightness actually coming into this and a lot more saturation than you perhaps would expect. And that's really a key part of achieving this look. And actually, I think we can get some great context for the overall look just as I'm starting to tie it up here, because this is actually as bright as I end up taking the basic skin before we go into starting to prepare to modulate colours and stuff. So here I'm probably about 70-30 now on the frog green, and one of the things I'm really concentrating on is far fewer highlights on the dark side of the moon, so to speak. The side of the face that's behind the light source, for example, is an area where I really want far fewer highlights. Even the back of the left hand, for example, these are all areas that I'll be leaving fairly dark. But you can see that the actual overall brightness that I'm working with is pretty high at this point, and the saturation is still really strong. So before we start to go into desaturating in preparation for changing colours, this is what I hope you will have in front of you, is something that is almost oversaturated so that it's got room to then start to be modified a little bit and still look punchy. So we're just nipping back to the palette now so I can show you mixing in that ice yellow, and this is the exact reason we use ice yellow, because it's still got a good luminosity to it, so it still complements our green and keeps it nice and rich and bold looking as we highlight up. And so now, as we start to apply this, what I want you to bear in mind is that it is still a highlight stage. We are still using this to further brighten the parts of the skin that we want to push forward in the highlight scheme. But at the same time, it's also a preparatory stage, getting ready for how we're going to start modifying that skin colour with pink later on. And because we've got these kind of yellow tones and these green tones, we're going to get these sort of goldeny, browny transition tones from this. So it is really important to consider this both as a highlight stage and as a preparatory stage for any pink glazing that you want to do. That has to be part of the plan from the start, and you can kind of see that reflected in how I'm highlighting here. So here I'm mixing up that pink now. I'm using AK Wine Red, which is extremely heavily pigmented. And I just want to quickly demonstrate to you that you do need to play around a little bit with the thinning, because you're going to need something that's transparent enough that you can actually build up a few layers. So just test it on your skin like I just did or whatever, but be sure that before you actually go in with this colour, you give it a couple of little tests and you know that it's not just going to wash out your whole model with really bright pink. And then when it comes to the application of those glazes, I basically like to just go forwards down the nose initially, and then kind of into the pits of the ears, and maybe a little bit around the knuckles. The knuckles isn't always necessary though. What I would say is necessary though is to come back in after that with your highlight colour and just start to push over some bright highlights again, so that it's a bit of a transition from the pink to the kind of paler tone. If it's all just pure pink, it just kind of is going to look drunk, I guess. It's, you know, it's just not quite the look we're going for. And then finally, just to round things off, I go back to that pink then and just reglaze the transition. And again, this just kind of reinforces the pinker parts whilst at the same time blending the paler parts back through into that pink and into that green. So it's kind of just like a normalizing pass, just to kind of average out all the colours. Once all that is done, this is what we end up with. And I think this is a really nice goblin skin recipe. Like I say, it really calls back to that sort of style that you see the Spanish painters painting their orcs and goblins in. And I really like that personally. You know, Corvus Belli's orcs are fantastic, in my opinion at least. So the idea with these techniques is just to remember, go oversaturated, go over bright in the areas where you're planning on glazing in pink, and then just really concentrate on contrast. Make sure that you have actually got that darkest green visible in the areas where there's no direct light hitting, and make sure that the areas where there's lots of direct light hitting, you've got a really good blend up through those tones. We're talking 6, 7, 8 stages of blending, not 2 or 3. And when I say blending, it's really just done with layering. So it's not like it's massively technical. You can, I think if you were doing this, say, on a bust, for example, you could maybe stipple and glaze the transitions to get a bit of a smoother step up between each layer. But on a miniature of sort of tabletop gaming size, it's really not necessary, and all we're looking for is just 6 or 7 different layers on top of each other, which will get us to where we want to be. So folks, I hope this one's been informative. It is short, but that's because it's just a goblin skin tutorial. You know, we already did a really comprehensive general skin tutorial that talks a lot more about sort of highlighting principles and stuff. So this one really is just to kind of add on to that previous skin tutorial and talk a little bit more about goblins, goblinoids, orcs, that kind of thing. Anything that you might want to paint green skin on. So I hope this one's useful to you. Thank you so much for your continued support, my lovely patrons, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye for now.